Let's now talk about the insecurity that we've been talking about in the North Rift. So the government said we're going to do something. The CS for the Interior said we're going to do something. The CS for the Interior has gone there and said we are actually going to do something. The president has said Nasio Tafadhali, we shall do something. Now the president has said let's deploy the military. The military is being deployed. We want to have that conversation. Joining us in the studio is a member of parliament for Turkana West, the Honorable Daniel Nanok, and a security expert, Dominic Wabala. Let's welcome them by giving them the day's proverb, CT.
Yes, our proverbs for this week come from the country of Zambia.
Mm-hmm.
He who paddles two canoes sinks.
Mm. He who paddles two canoes
Yes.
sinks.
Yes.
Hivyo tu.
As simple as that.
Mheshimiwa Nanok, good morning.
Morning to you, Latif.
Welcome to the big conversation this week.
Thank you.
That proverb, does it make any sense? He who paddles two canoes sinks.
It's also like the case of the hyena that gets to
A fork.
An intersection.
doesn't know which side to pick and decides that he goes both of them, then he will just split itself there.
Mm.
So something similar to that.
Something similar.
Yes.
Safi. Dominic Wabala, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Welcome to the situation.
Thank you.
Let's start with the proverb. What's your interpretation of it?
And it's for me, it looks. Interprets to you can't serve two masters at the same time.
You cannot serve two masters.
Two masters at the same time.
Yeah. Dominic, you are a security expert. What does that mean?
I think having some knowledge of security issues, and trying to unravel what is troubling matters security, assuming that you have a solution to what is going on. Yeah, that is my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not participating in insecurity.
not participating in insecurity, of course, not participating in insecurity, but understanding why the term insecurity is being used, and it's a very wide subject that you can't pinpoint. Yeah,
Karibu sana.
You know, there are those who actually major and qualify to the point of having doctoral qualifications in security services, meaning they've studied it academically, so they understand it. And then there are those who we refer to, we reference them as people in the security sector. And the reference, the gentleman who was here before you, was somebody who is a Secretary General of the private security organizations of this union of this country. People in the police service, same people in the armed forces, GSU, all these. Now, so I find this puzzling. Whenever you ask and you say somebody is a security expert, I'm actually building up on what Eric asked. So what is it that one does in order to become an analyst, a consultant, an expert in security matters?
when you dedicate your life and time to issue security, analyzing, understanding, and trying to understand the intricacies of security and insecurity. I have, for the last 25 years, been a journalist covering matters security in the region, in Kenya, Uganda, Somali. That is what I've been doing. I believe I've also studied quite some in issues security by virtue of the job that I've been doing.
So when you say cover, does it mean that you've been to these war-torn areas? You've actually lived among people who are in conflict with others, so that you could argue you have a first-hand experience in what it is that happens?
Yes, I have. I have lived in areas that have been afflicted. I have covered war. I have interacted with the victims of war. That is my understanding.
You are an expert. Yes.
Ndio.
No. That now we can proceed.
Vetting happened.
Oh, it did.
Successfully vetted.
No, we can now continue.
Yeah. Look at what was going on yesterday and the day before that, Mheshimiwa, when we saw that the Gazette notice then had been released in terms of KDF being released to the North Rift. There was a lot of hullabaloo then and thereafter in terms of what Parliament had or had not done to allow this to happen. That notwithstanding, we've also seen that there are boots on the ground already. As of last evening, military jets had yesterday afternoon started hovering over parts of the troubled northern Rift Valley, signalling the arrival of KDF troops. The soldiers had been assigned to execute what has been described as a painful but decisive operation to rid the region of criminals behind the banditry menace. So, that presence is there. It seems to be the first thing of this nature that has happened when it comes to the insecurity issue in the North Rift. In your opinion, is this the way to go?
Thank you. First and foremost, I saw the Gazette notice like every other Kenyan. And it is supposed to deal with the situation in the North or the North Rift. This is not the first time that it will happen in the North. The North has lived through these operations. Not one, not two, not three. At least for this government, this is the first one. But they have been there. And we've had insecurity recurring. I think it is a good idea. Maybe on my part as a representative of the people and listening to Dominic say he's an expert, he's studied insecurity and has at least been to those places. I was born, brought up, I have lived in insecurity. So between myself and Dominic, if you are to ask who is the expert in terms of knowing, I've lived in security. I used to stay awake throughout the night because there were lacking raiders around the vicinity. It's that difficult. In this particular case, KDF deployment may be the goodwill of the government of the day to get rid of this problem, because they have the president himself, none other than the president himself, pronounced himself to this issue of insecurity and banditry in northern Kenya. The minister was in my sub-county or constituency early this month, made some pronouncements, and it's continuing. I hope this time round the strategy will be different. I hope this time round it is not the wanton rounding up of people in settlements. Those who are responsible for banditry, you will not see them today. They were given amnesty for 3 days to return the guns.
Their firearms.
I wonder if any gun has been returned.
Who do you think is responsible
For what?
for the banditry? You're saying those responsible, we are not going to see them.
No, of course, these are our people. Okay? These are people who have lived in this life. There are criminal elements like any other place which can have criminals. But these ones have decided to use the gun to steal livestock. Okay? But this is a whole trade. The one who goes to raid, the one who buys the raided animals, yeah, as Natembea put it, it's a whole chain. So you're only dealing with one, the bandit. But how will you know that this is a bandit? I am sure these guys have already dissipated themselves into the community.
So the community knows them.
Assuming, yes, some of them definitely will be known. But the way they will be flushed out, maybe that is where we need intelligence.
Do you think the community is willing to give them up?
It all depends on the approach. Yeah? I don't think, like in my county, I don't think the Turkanas will be ready to harbor these people. They have suffered for so long.
But well,
They should be able to give them up.
let's talk practically, Mheshimiwa Nanok. The people of Turkana West, right?
Yes.
Have been victims of these attacks.
Yes.
Of course, they have not been attacked by their own neighbors, not the people within the community,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's people from outside the community.
True.
The people from neighboring communities have probably been attacked by people from your community. So the people from your community are not victims of their own people. They are
No,
victims
in my particular constituency, no.
They are victims from the other side.
From across the country, from South Sudan,
So the
from
question
Uganda.
I'm asking is, would the people in your community who know these guys are the ones who go and raid on the other side, would they give them up and say, we know these people, they are involved in, it's only that they don't steal our cattle, but we know they're involved in.
See, Latif, I don't know whether I'm getting you. Whether you want me to say that my people can say those others or they themselves, the Turkana saying on the Turkanas.
Yes.
I mean, they live together. If you are a raider, they will know. They will definitely know.
Will they give them up?
How many times they have? There are people who have been caught. There are people who have been reported. Yeah, they have. They have done that. What happens after that is what I cannot know. Yeah.
Dominic, you've covered this in several ways. You've worked at the Standard Group and you've covered insecurity. You've covered insecurity in some of these constituencies and counties. When you see this deployment of police officers, because you've seen it before, then now there's deployment of the military in the area. Do you see it actually flashing out the real culprits?
I don't think it will, because, like Mheshimiwa says, the culprits have already moved. I mean, the misfortune is that we announce the deployment and then deploy. So by the time the boots hit the ground, the culprits have already moved. But even as we say that, for a long time, and it has been happening, we saw the killing of police. We've seen the killing of security officers by culprits from both sides, whether it is Turkana, Pokot, or Samburu, wherever it is. We have seen them. We have seen it happening. So the challenge actually is when the community looks at security forces as the enemy instead of looking at the people or the raiders or the cattle rustlers as the enemy. That is where the challenge comes in, because most of the time when boots are sent on the ground, then there's hue and cry, and then we'll hear there was rape, there was theft, there was looting, and all that by security agencies who are supposed to provide security to the community. That is the challenge that we'll face and will continue facing. It is only until we address the issues, as a country, we address the issues of what is really happening, which is lack of resources. As in, most of the time, it is one group, one community going in search of pasture and water and all that. Then there is a conflict, either for the scarcity over the scarcity of those resources, or when one sees the other's livestock as enticing and gets them. That is the challenge that we'll continue facing.
I have to ask this question. We talk of security, and our mind immediately goes to disciplined forces, whether they're the domestic variety that we refer to as the police or the army. So I have to ask, I mean, when you look at security, when you look at now the converse, which is insecurity, you grew up in it, you have studied it, you have given it a 360 from an academic perspective, and then but his is a lived experience. What then would you say really forms insecurity, or what would you consider security? Is it an abundance of armed personnel? Is it an abundance of the army? What would constitute security? Because we've had this before. And I'm asking this because we've had insecurity in very many parts of this country. There have been flashes of it. We had this insecurity we are talking about. The northern part of this country had it in abundance. That was before we invented the terrorist groups. The problems were there. The problems we now have to do with terrorist groups. But what we had previously, there's hardly any of it. So you have to ask the question. Our neighbors across Uganda has had this problem for the longest time. Among the Karamojong, that problem isn't quite there now. What I said, it isn't quite there. It isn't what it was before. Mm-hmm. And the groups there were seriously armed. So I'm asking the question, so this security we keep talking about, what are we talking about really?
I think we as a people have a problem. And there was a not so enticing statement made by the former president Uhuru Kenyatta when he said security begins with you, when you have to start doing that. Why you are saying, and I concur with you that in Uganda there used to be that problem, but it has reduced significantly. Yes. And it's because Ugandans have come up with have always had what you call a community policing in the name of Nyumba Kumi. And in that, you need to know your neighbor and your surroundings. You must be aware of your surroundings, so that when you see something that is out of the norm, you are supposed to report to the LC, the local leadership in Uganda. You are supposed to report. And if somebody comes to, assuming it's my home. By the way, I come from Busia, so I've also lived partly in that insecurity. So that in the event that you see somebody who is foreign, it is your duty as a citizen, as a member of the community, to find out, hey, by the way, who are you, and who have you come to visit? What is your business in our area, in our neighborhood? Yeah, such that even the local leadership knows that hey, Dominic has come to this place, and he is a visitor to Latif, and he is going to stay around for this number of time, this number of days. Yeah, and just that to make the community aware of any strange happenings that happen. But we have, that is the challenge that we have as Kenyans. We are not keen on our environment.
But is that really it? Because, and let me perhaps join a question to it. Do the people in these far-flung areas actually consider themselves to be Kenyans, like other Kenyans, or do they think that Kenya is the other part of Kenya, which is not where they live?
What do you mean?
What I mean is that I've been to parts of this country where people ask you about Kenya, and I'm in Kenya.
Well, I think you don't need to stretch that. That is a figurative statement,
which is supposed to mean
meaning that there is imbalance.
Yes.
Okay, we feel not taken care of like the others. That is basically what it means. But you can't say that is a belief that they are not in Kenya. I am a Kenyan.
No. But is that not at the heart? If we have a situation that seems to grow and never comes to an end, and people suffer for years on end, they have every reason to believe that, because they also know that other parts of the country don't have the problems they have.
Can I ask that question differently, perhaps,
yes.
If we saw such, movement or such a security situation, if we saw it in Nairobi, for example, or if we saw it in Nakuru, for example, in your opinion, do you think that by now something would have been done about it?
Nairobi. A movement in Nairobi, in Kisumu, in Eldoret.
Yes.
A cattle raid.
Yes.
Let's call it a gang.
Let's call it something else. Let's
A
call it a
gang.
gang.
Yeah.
Gang
Yes,
wars,
because
for
There's a
example.
militia that is heavily
Yeah, there are
armed.
gangs in this city and there. And how are they handled? They are criminals. And the security forces have their ways of dealing with those gangs.
Yes.
They collect intelligence, they will follow up individuals and until they nab them.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
But in the case of the bandits and the cattle rustlers, I don't think the security officers follow them in that manner. And so that is different.
Okay.
And it could be the difference that needs to be brought on. Yeah? And I want to say, you know, Muga, it is the guns. The presence of the guns in the north is insecurity in their own right. If there was a way of eliminating those guns from the north, you will not need to be sending the army.
Okay.
You will not need to be sending the police. I mean, or the uniformed officers who end up becoming targets, actually. They become part of, actually, the conflict. Because when they are shot at, like, look at the officers that were killed on the highway in KWS camp in Turkana South. What was their mistake? Just that they
Their
were
presence.
on duty. Yeah? To secure the people, their livestock, or their properties. And there they were. And there were those who were targeting these animals that were being secured. So there are really collateral damage in this kind of a game. In Nairobi here, when the police are following up, for instance, say Daniel, who is a criminal, whose intelligence is being sought for, the other Kenyans are busy doing their normal day-to-day businesses. But in this particular case, when now these criminals are going to be followed, do you know there will be no peace
Sure.
So it'll be
in the region? Everyone will be running. I just got some clip of some fellows who are responding to the curfew in Kainuk, in West Pokot, Sigor. And people are literally running in the
Because-
town to get to their homes.
to get home before
That
the
is
curfew begins.
Before the curfew time.
So it's disrupting
It is very disruptive,
people's
by the
lives
way,
and
now.
livelihoods.
But that is where we've reached.
Let's take
If
a
that
break.
is what will bring us back to our senses, maybe that is what the president said about being a painful decision.
Let's take a break. 28 minutes to 9. The Honorable Daniel Nanok, Member of Parliament for Turkana West constituency. And Dominic Wabala, he is a security expert. He's a journalist who's covered insecurity incidences in the country for many years and outside the country as well. So he has interacted with matters of security for a long time. They're here with us this morning because you're talking about the deployment of KDF and extra security personnel to banditry-prone regions of the North Rift.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Let's talk about the procedure for a bit. I mean, it was a big issue yesterday on how this has unfolded. So the government decides we need to beef up security and security personnel in the area, and they've sent police and various formations of the police, the GSU, the anti-stock theft, the Rapid Results Initiative, what are they called? Rapid Deployment Unit, right? Regular police sent there, still nothing. And then they decide, let's call in the big guns, the military, the KDF is going to be deployed there. Gazette notice says, in accordance with the Constitution and the KDF Act, I, the CS for Defense, Eden Duale, I am announcing that the military shall be deployed from the 15th. And questions start emerging. Wait a minute. Can you deploy the military without, first of all, seeking the authority of Parliament? And then there's a clarification that comes in from the CS for Interior. You know, this one is a police-led operation. That one does not really require Parliament. If it was a military-led operation, that one would require Parliament. Dominic.
My take is that I believe that is just an excuse that we are picking up to criticize what has been done by the government. I think it comes from the leaders of that area, and I think without fear of favor, I'll say that leaders from that area, from the North Rift, are to blame for all that is happening. That they seem to be in cahoots with the people who are causing mayhem in that area.
Who's they?
Pardon, the leaders.
Okay.
Leaders, now this one is inclusive. Church leaders, community leaders, politicians,
yes,
youth
they are
leaders, women group leaders.
They are
Killable to leader.
because they are the leaders of this area. I believe they know who is doing what. We have had cases like in 2018 where an MCA and an MP were implicated in buying and arming of a particular group of people, and they were seized by the arms were seized by the government. We have seen several leaders from Turkana, from Pokot, being arrested and charged in court for banditry. And whenever there's deployment, there's always this hue and cry, whether it is the police, whether it is the army. We have always had that.
So, Dominic, what you're saying is this is all noise.
It is all
It
noise.
should not matter the procedure used as long as the issue is being addressed.
The duty of the government, like we say, is the protection of life and property.
Okay.
And in political science, governance is the use of or threat of use of coercion. That is what governance is. I mean, there are not two ways
does the
about
government
it.
have a responsibility to follow procedure, obey the rule of law?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Absolutely does. It's the reason that we have the procedures laid down, that this is what they are supposed to do. It is that is something that they are supposed to do. In this case, I think the procedure they took was to issue the Gazette notice. That is as far as it went.
But
the parliament was resuming when
Yesterday
itself. Was that done yesterday?
That's a question. Was the gazettement after or before?
Before. But like I say, those are just excuses that we are doing.
Dominic, I hear you saying two things here. On one hand, you're saying people who are complaining that the government hasn't, followed procedure by then, saying KDF military forces will go into the north, they're just noise because this thing needs to be rounded up. At the same time, you're saying they know who these people are. Wouldn't it be then, procedurally then, for government to say, if you know and I know, and everybody else knows, then government surely must know. Why are they not turning out that tap? That would be, to me, what procedure you ought to follow. Because you also being in security, you know that the business of conflict is not cheap. You know that the weapons that we are seeing here, that the CS Kindiki has said, please, we're giving you 48 hours, 72 hours amnesty to give up. The cheapest of those weapons is 40,000 shillings per piece. The most expensive going well above 200,000 shillings. It is difficult to imagine that the people who are looking for food, who come to Mheshimiwa's door, looking for food, are affording rifles, are affording this ammunition. Wouldn't it then be the procedural thing to do to shut off those taps if everybody knows who these people are?
This is very interesting. We have, like Mheshimiwa says, we have the area is straddled by Ethiopia, is straddled by Uganda and South Sudan. Areas that have had conflict. There is no control of movement of weapons. It is near impossible to think that you will shut as a tap, that will just shut the flow of weapons. It's not practical.
The people who fund conflict have not funded conflict because they didn't have anything to do. They fund conflict because of its commercial viability for them.
Thank you.
And that is what I am saying. If we are all saying we know, then everybody knows. And that for me ought to be the next port of call. If everybody knows, why then do you think it's not in the interest to then start to look for avenues to shut that off? I'm not saying go and turn it off, but there are procedures that you can follow to make sure that it's done. We know that there have been conflicts in the war that have been fueled by individuals. We know this. So why is it so difficult in this case to get it done? And for me, it sounds as though we could be saying that it's not just the local leadership who is aware of what is going on, but that it goes up much higher.
There's
Mheshimiwa seems to have something he wants to say.
No, it's okay. Let Dominic finish his mind trail.
in security, there are things you can say and there are things you can't say. Action must be taken based on available evidence. I'm not in governance, so I don't know why what I know is not being acted on, what we know as a people is not being acted on. But we have seen several times when politicians, when MPs have been charged in court, arrested and charged in court for particular over incidents of banditry. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of us have seen that. Why that action has not been followed up to the end?
I want to take us back. Okay. And I want to ask the question, what sort of ecosystem do you think enables what we are talking about to be as endemic as it is? Or what is it that makes banditry a growth industry? What is it that makes it thrive?
This thing that we're discussing is a criminal enterprise.
It is a criminal enterprise.
What it has taken to thrive is state protection. I've answered your question.
Thank you.
Mheshimiwa.
State protection. That I don't know. Maybe if you have information.
Or lack of political will to deal with
But that's what it is. That lack of political, what is that?
It's state protection. According to Eric.
What kind of will do the police need to have to collect information, intelligence for that matter, about Daniel, who is involved in this criminal enterprise?
Not much.
What goodwill does he need to have?
Not much.
No.
Actually, I can answer your question and tell you this. When we brought in the 2010 Constitution, there is something we brought in with it called public participation. It's a really broad term, but it's a very nice one. So I will ask you the question, and I would ask of the leaders who come from those regions. How often are you consulted when the government machinery and enterprise go about discussing things about your area? How often are you consulted?
No, unless I take myself there.
Precisely.
Okay.
So how are they talking?
Unless my people have asked me questions which force me to engage.
So how then do you talk about planning an operation in an area when the people who grew up, who represent these people, are not integral to it? What are the chances of your success?
This is what I'd actually wanted to chip in. Yes, the order was put out, and I hear you asking the question as to whether it was legally done according to the Constitution and all that. And I want to concur with Dominic in what he has observed. Let us not use the legal excuse to hold back saving of lives, okay, in these war-torn areas. Let me say it's a war actually that is going on because lives are getting lost.
Yep.
And it is the duty of government to secure lives, to secure property of Kenyans and anybody who lives in this country. So in terms of government reacting, this just didn't happen. It has been ongoing. Maybe I would say, I'm not talking for government here, but I would imagine they have been following the happenings and it got to that point where they must act. And so they have acted. Maybe the question, Latif and team, that we should be answering here is whether we will succeed in this operation this time round. I have told you, with the presence of guns in the northern Kenya, and anywhere, even in Nairobi here, there are guns. Yeah? But you know, the way the policing is done for these criminals who carry guns in Nairobi seems to thwart them and thwart their efforts.
Yeah.
But in the north, I don't think that is being followed. I don't think the criminals are actually being identified. You keep on referring to leadership being the cause of all this. They are the ones, by the way, I'm not the only one who can afford to buy a gun in Turkana.
No.
And I don't own a gun, personally. The issue of this banditry being a lifeline, a business, a trade with its chain, yeah? So maybe that is what you are saying, close the tap. And you can't. You can't close, because for as long as there is someone wanting to take from another person because they are not satisfied with what they have, you will always have these problems. So government has to be alert. Muga, you've said public participation. Am I involved? Yes, I should. Kenyans should. But there is this statement I just said. We were all elected the other day. Okay? But there is someone amongst the elected leaders who can consume confidential security information and another one can't.
Yep.
In the sub-county security committee, I don't sit in that committee. But they sit to organize security of the sub-county.
And yet you are the elected
I am
leader of
the
these
elected
people.
leader. I would expect, for God's sake, to be consulted. Because I represent the people, the voice of the people.
I wouldn't say consulted. You should
Okay?
be an integral part of it.
Of that security arrangement. But there is the fear that maybe I'm the one funding.
Okay.
But he can also be the chairman of the sub-security committee that could be funding.
It's possible. So then
Because
is
it
it
is.
safe to say
Yeah?
then that if, just like what you're alluding to now, because let's look at it. If there was a genuine desire, the goodwill that Dominic spoke of, if there truly was a genuine desire, backed up by action, proper action, to have this situation sorted out, we would have seen it. We would have seen it. Look at what they called Operation Commercial Uhalifu in the North Rifts. It was led by Commissioner of Police Joseph Limo. They recovered rifles, they recovered ammunition, stolen livestock, and they led to the arrest of perhaps the individual that you were speaking of, notorious highway robber who has for long been linked to the banditry attacks in Lorogon in Turkana County. Okay? The attacks resumed last month after that one was arrested. So, come on, it wasn't him only, isn't it? Then Major General David Tarus, he pledged to help security agencies find a lasting solution to the perennial banditry challenges experienced in the area. Last weekend, it flared up again. So this is the thing. Are we hearing declarations of things and not then declaration of intent?
You know, this situation of banditry that we speak of, it's unique, it's specific, and it's in certain areas. When we had independence in the period there, immediately thereafter, there was a unit that was based in Gilgil that was set up specifically to deal with this matter. Specifically.
Yes, that's true.
It's still there.
And to be a member,
It's there.
yes, it is there, of course. Gilgil hasn't gone anywhere. And to be able to be part of this particular unit, you needed to come from certain areas. Because they required people who had living knowledge of that sort of terrain, the culture and the ways of people. Now you're talking about will. If this problem existed then, we knew about it. Should this unit not have been strengthened to the point where they are the ones who are deployed when you have this problem? Because it's a special problem, it requires a special unit.
Now, Muga, let me improve your argument.
Please
in
improve.
terms of the that special police unit.
Give it turbo. Yes.
We have gone ahead as the leaders from the North Rift and requested government to employ or recruit what we call the National Police Reservists. And these National Police Reservists are purely locals. They live the life. They know the people. What I think now needs to be done, even as ASTU is already there and it's established, let the NPRs deal with the question of banditry in their areas because they are sons of the
They are
soil.
locals.
They are locals. They know the terrain. They are herders. Okay? And let them be taken through all the legal requirements that will make them answerable for their actions, so that they don't use the rifles that government gives them to go and raid or cause mayhem. Okay? That is what we need to do for the northern Kenya. These officers who are in the camps, police camps, any of these units, they are in one particular place. The bandits are all over. Yeah? They can walk 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers in a day. These bandits go and strike in point A, and within a day, they are 40 kilometers away from the point of action. So those who know them are better placed. So for me, one improvement, and we've heard these NPRs, they are being recruited. If they can be trained, they can be given the force orders so that they now conduct their business like any other police unit. And they don't get transferred, and they live amongst the community. Then let them now be the ones to give all the information that you need about the raiders, who is involved in gun running. They will, because they live amongst the people. That would be something. This operation, as I see it, what I read, if it is correct, is a 30-day operation. In 1 month, all that the military, the police that have been deployed will presumably be over legally, but would it have resolved this problem that has been with us for all the years? You need to live there. You need to be part of the life there to make this difference.
You need to cut it off at the head.
Yes.
That is true.
Who is running this racket? It is not those things that used to happen in the 50s or 60s where you'd say, I mean, it's about, rite of passage and all, where youth are stealing.
This one isn't that.
Or even just small band of criminals who are coming and stealing cattle and going to sell and looking for a market to sell, because it's difficult to actually even find a market. You go into a market and you have 100 cows, and the local community will not ask you, hey, but these cows do not look like they belong here. You'll be found out. There's somebody who's running this thing, and that's why I talk about state protection.
I talked about leadership. You were talking about state protection and all that.
Unsanctioned state protection.
And look at it this way.
Deep state.
How does somebody take 200 head of cattle stolen from one community and disappears? It is not possible. One, that place is that place is dry. So 200 head of cattle will raises a lot of dust.
Yes.
So how can they disappear
just like
that?
Vanish.
It's not possible. They are ending up like the Tanzania governor was saying, they're ending up on our plates in Mombasa, in Nairobi, and everywhere. It's a business for people. And it is these people that are supposed to be, because they are the ones who are financing the arming of the bandits.
Yes.
Now we are looking at it as a
community issue.
A community issue, one tribe versus another.
No.
When it is an enterprise that is being funded by well-protected people who the government is not taking action on. If action was taken against these people,
that's it.
Then that is
we
it.
would not even need to
this.
deploy, the community youth to become home guards. We don't need that. Sniff out our persons who are running this racket, who's financing this thing, who's creating that huge demand, because this is a huge demand for animals to actually end up somewhere. Who is this? Who's off-taking the animals? Who's providing the arms? Who's providing the logistics for this thing to happen? Like you asked, Mheshimiwa Nanok, is it really difficult for intelligence agencies to find out this in this country? We have seen the work of intelligence agencies in this country. They sniff out some guy who has crossed through the border somewhere and has come and lived in a community, and they sniff them out. They pick that person up. Is it really difficult to pick out the people who are financing this?
That's what I'm saying, Latif. It should be intelligence-driven interventions. We just can't continue firefighting. We've seen this fight here today, and we are deploying. After a month, we are off. It should be continuous. Absolutely. It should be continuous. Latif, there's something I want to say. The question, like what is happening between Turkana County and West Pokot, there is a simmering conflict between the two counties in terms of boundaries. It is a question that I'm told went even to the Senate sometimes back. I think government needs to bring that equation into this matrix.
How long has that conflict existed, Mheshimiwa?
Well, it's a sense of it's been there. It has been there. Only that there are no points of ventilation. I don't think there has been a discussion touching on this question.
On how to address
the
it.
boundary. Yes, the boundary between the Turkana and the Pokots of West Pokot and Baringo.
And Baringo,
The
yes.
Kapedo problem.
Yes.
That's a big one
Does
as well.
Kapedo belong to
Is
Turkana
it in-
County
or in
or it
Baringo?
belongs to Baringo County?
Let's
we
go
can't
to-
run away.
Let's
That
go to the
is
news
part of
and then we continue the conversation, because we'd also like to hear from the people what they think about this deployment of the military. Is it going to solve the insecurity challenges in the North Rift?